I'm Adama Jalloh. I'm a freelance photographer. I've been freelancing for about 3 years now. And I studied at Arts University Bournemouth I graduated there about 5 years ago. And I think, like, with photography in general, I've always kind of gravitated towards it. It's something that I've always it's always something that I've always been passionate about. And I think when I was in school, I never really was the academic type, so like I always leaned towards art, and it's always kind of stuck with me up until this point. So yeah, a lot of my work tends to focus around like race, identity and culture, and me just kind of like highlighting intimate moments and traditions. So I'll be talking a bit about like some of my personal projects that I've done over the years, and then I'll talk a bit about the street photography stuff that I've been doing. That's pretty much work in progress. So this image is part of a series called Sarah, which is an Islamic custom within my tradition. Because my parents are from Sierra Leone, so like both of them were born and raised as like Muslims, and my mum has tend to kind of like bounce around religions quite often. But the ceremony itself, it's pretty much where we pay respects to someone that's died. So you get an imam that comes into the space. It can be really small, and we're pretty much just kind of praying, kind of paying our last respects, and there's an exchange of money as well, and you're also kind of wearing ashobi, which is pretty much an African attire that you wear. Most of the time it's family members that are wearing them, so you can kind of pinpoint who the family members are of the person that died. So I pretty much grew up in a household where like my mom, like I said, she was born as Muslim and then she bounced around into like Christianity and Catholicism. But since around the time that my grandparents died, she definitely tried to kind of withhold certain Islamic kind of customs, especially around the time when my grandma was about to kind of die, since she couldn't really practice certain things or like do Ramadan. So my mum would kind of take over and be praying for her, or just kind of now fasting as well. So during the time I decided to start this project, it was more so when my mum decided to do the ceremony when it was like the 5th and 4th anniversary of like my grandparents' death. And that was when I really kind of started thinking about why I decided to do this project, because I realized in general, whenever there's things that's focused around Sierra Leone, it's to do with like poverty or death and trauma. And even though this project is based around death, there's other underlying factors that I kind of wanted to highlight, just in terms of like reasons to why people might decide to kind of change over to a certain religion, or why they've now decided to kind of still pay respects to certain parts of Islam, the way that they dress, the way people interact. So I just wanted to kind of highlight aspects of what happened within the Sierra Leonean community. So yeah, here's a few of the images that I took. And then another project that I did around 2015. So this is part of a project called You Fit the Description. And it's pretty much a series that's exploring like the disproportionate amount of like young Black and Asian men that get stopped and searched by the police. And for me, like this project was really difficult for like various reasons, where when I first initially started the project, it was pretty much around the time where I would literally be seeing young boys, particularly Black and Asian men, where they would be being stopped by the police. Literally, it was a daily occurrence, and I really wanted to kind of find a way to highlight and talk about it. And I tried reaching out to like quite a few organizations about it, but they really weren't forthcoming, which is understandable because I'm a complete stranger and they didn't feel like they could trust me. So I had to now kind of figure out a way of going about the project myself. So I literally just decided to kind of now be walking around the street and approaching young boys and just getting their opinions about the subject. And if they by chance were stopped and searched by the police as well, that's like an extended conversation to have as well. And most of the boys that I did approach were stopped by the police. So it was interesting kind of getting their perspective and their viewpoint on it. So like even with this boy here, his name's Jaya, and pretty much 5 minutes before I had approached him, he was stopped and searched by the police. So already he had like a lot of like anger and a lot to say as well. And they tend to kind of believe like not only because of the color of their skin, it's because of the clothes that they wear as well. And it was interesting kind of hearing their perspective, because a lot of the times when I was approaching them, around the time when I was approaching them, some of them were probably around 15. So it's just kind of a little bit scary for you to know and witness someone at the age of 15 having to learn their rights of why they shouldn't be stopped by the police. So I haven't really continued on with this project. Likely I will at a certain date, I don't know when. But yeah, hopefully at some point I will get back to it. And this project is called Identity. It was pretty much one of the first projects I feel like I was now kind of figuring out what type of like stories I wanted to tell, just in terms of what I was choosing to kind of show to others and what kind of themes I was choosing to now kind of lay into my work. Because I think when I was in like the beginning stages of uni, and like even when I finished, I kind of felt like sometimes I was picking projects or deciding to pick certain subjects just because they seem cool or they're interesting at that particular point. But then I realized that I didn't really resonate with it so well, and it kind of showed through the images that I would take as well. And I think like a lot of the times when I was looking at certain photographers for inspiration, I always kind of felt like as if I needed to travel really far in order to kind of get the most amazing images ever. And I think as I started kind of walking around my area a lot more, I did have more appreciation for just even the like simple things. So like now I was kind of out of that headspace of feeling the need to travel far, and everything was in my doorstep. So I was literally going to like hair salons within my area because I live in Peckham. And again, it was very difficult to kind of get access, mainly again to do with trust. And a lot of the times when I was approaching like women who were doing hair or just people who were getting their hair done, they were very much like, no, I just don't want it. Like you've got certain aunties where they're telling you like, I don't want this picture to end up in Zimbabwe. And I'm like, that's not gonna happen, it's fine. But it's just, yeah, trying to kind of gain gradual trust was quite hard, and just reassuring them and just now having to show them past images that I had like taken so that they can know that it's not going anywhere like crazy. But that made me kind of think a lot more about just even how Black women, more so older Black women, have this lack of trust because they feel like as if someone's gonna embarrass them in some sort of way or kind of be of harm. So that made me think a lot more about that. And here's some of my street photography stuff that I'll be talking about as well, where, like I mentioned before, it's more so me being a bit more appreciative of just like my surroundings, and kind of, I realized as I was kind of shooting more street photography stuff, it was forming into like an archive, but at the time I wasn't really super conscious of that, because I think around the time I was now shooting street photography, I definitely was kind of finding inspiration from like New York-based photographers that were like shooting stuff in the 60s and the 70s. But then I now was trying to kind of figure out a way to kind of tell my own story in my own way. I think this is probably like one of the few that's in color, but like I feel like most of the time the reason to why like my images are in black and white is again based on the fact that I'm just kind of, it was more to do with the inspiration, and also I kind of felt like as if me looking at the images that I was taking, sometimes like the vibrancy of it was still there without the color needing to be there. So like you can still feel the life in the images without the need of like color. I feel like sometimes color can distract you sometimes. So it was nice kind of being able to kind of tell stories in a way where I felt like it was very much more memory based for me. Because a lot of the times like the images that I am taking, it's more so like from like past experience, or like it's just things that I'm kind of I've seen before, and I'm now retelling it in my own way. So I feel like now I've gotten to this place where like the more people see my images, a lot of the time people can like resonate with it as well and connect, because it's just things that they've experienced or gone through, and then if they haven't necessarily like seen things like this is kind of like now a new way of kind of seeing things or having a new perspective on a certain community. So like, as I started shooting more street photography, I realized it was just forming into a project on its own. And then I decided to call it Love Story. So just essentially it focuses on my relationship with like aspects of London and just like the beauty of Black communities, just seen through like your everyday moments. So like, yeah, so I'll just read a bit about it. So Love Story is about wanting to show a narrative that displays a sense of charisma, intimacy, and joy. So you've got aunties and their kids in their Sunday best, school children owning the streets at 3:30 on a weekday. You've got teenagers running errands for their mums, or someone just simply having a moment to themselves. So all these moments are things that I just want to glorify, because I feel like they're all very different, but they all link very closely as well. And like I mentioned before, like the memories that I hold whilst growing up, just speak through the images that I take. So yeah, and then I'm just gonna talk a bit more in depth about certain images, or just like pretty much the starting point of like me shooting street photography and the amount of no's that I would get when I would approach people, because it's very scary, like it's super daunting. So like with this image on the left, it was essentially supposed to be part of my You Fit the Description project, where I approached someone who was the founder of this organization called Gangs Unite, where he pretty much helps young boys who are pretty much kind of stuck in that realm of being in postcode wars or like getting themselves into trouble, and now he's just trying to find a way to make them navigate through life without getting themselves into like a lot of mishap. So when I did approach him, he was pretty much honest and did say to me, like, when I do come, likely most or maybe majority of them won't be there because there is that fear of stepping into the wrong side of the street or like a particular postcode, and there will be a bit of trouble. So when I got there, it was these two girls there. So I didn't really know where this was gonna go. But I decided to stay and just kind of continue talking to them. And then I think that was pretty much the starting point of me now realizing how much I enjoyed the process of really bonding with the people that I photograph. So the girl on the left is Daniela, and the girl on the right is Karina. And Karina was just like very free and just like talkative. And then you had Daniela, who was just quiet throughout the whole time until like maybe towards the end of me kind of interacting with them. And it was just interesting kind of just even observing and watching how someone going from them going really quiet and then now them gradually deciding to open up to you because you can tell that they can trust you a lot more. So like, I feel like now that's very much how I kind of have my approach with like photography in general. Sometimes with street photography, it's just gonna be very quick, where people are just gonna say yes, and then they're just gonna walk off, and that's it. But I do enjoy kind of having like long-standing periods with people, and it tends to translate quite a lot of like the commission-based stuff that I do. So like with this image on the right, I literally just asked him, I was like, can I take a photo? And he was like, yeah. And then he walked off. He just walked off. So it was just interesting kind of having that contrast, because both of these images were taken in Walthamstow. And I think this was taken probably like 2 days before. So like I was definitely on that high of like asking someone and then saying yes straight away. And then I get there and then you have someone who's being very slow and taking their time with how they maneuver around me. So it was just a lot of readjusting, but then realizing, I guess, within myself what kind of approach I wanted to take with how I shoot people. And then it's another person that I approached, I think maybe 2-3 years ago. So like this project is pretty much ongoing. Like I guess the beginning stages of me shooting street photography is 2015, but it's just going to continue till whenever. And I followed him around quite a lot before I approached him. So, because like I feel like even though like I've been shooting street photography for quite a while, I feel like it's still scary to kind of now wait for that moment for whether or not they're going to say yes or no. Like, whether they do say yes or no, it's not an issue, but it's just that scary part of actually asking them. So like I approached him and he was really lovely and really kind, but again, it just made me kind of think about the way people choose to convey themselves in front of the camera, because he's not like this. Like, even I feel like he puts on like a vibrato. Like, as soon as the camera came up, he's now like henching up his chest and his shoulders. But I guess that's the kind of character that he wanted to display. But yeah, it just made me think a lot more about how much photography can be like a collaborative process, and it's not just me deciding to kind of tell them what to do. I don't really feel like I tend to tell people what to do anyways. That's not really in my nature when it comes to shooting. So it's always interesting seeing the way people choose to show themselves to me. And now I feel like it's interesting where I bump into him quite regularly. It's just a thing where like every 3 months within a year, like we'll bump into each other because we live in the same area. And then he just gives me like an update about his life. So that's quite interesting as well. And he's telling me he wants to be a freelance coach, which, yeah, he's a freelance coach, and now he's kind of getting into building his business. And also, I've realized as well, with street photography, like not only has it been like training my eye, it's also been a thing where like, it's been like training my ears. So it's just more so that thing where like, even if I haven't seen something, if I hear it, that's when I'm preparing to kind of take a shot. So it's more so similar like this, where I was already focusing on something else and I heard them running. So by that point now, I'm literally waiting for them to go past me and then I'll take the shot. So it's just interesting seeing the way my body now reacts to certain things, or how alert I am to certain things that I like hear. But yeah, I guess like now I'll be a little bit silent and just go for a run through of some of the images that I've taken. There's also this as well, where when I took this, with both of these images, I think what's interesting for me is more so the thing where, because of how much things are changing in terms of gentrification and how things are just becoming a bit more rapid, like the shop that's behind the school kids right now, it's not there anymore. And then you've got this estate that's quite close to me where it's gradually being knocked down. So for me, I think it's quite important that I'm documenting as I go along, because even if like these places aren't there anymore, it's still a vivid like memory in certain people's minds, and it's been captured in a certain moment. So yeah, that's it really. Cool.